Hello, I'm Mitch.
And I'm Rosalie.
Looking back in time, we can all acknowledge the evil stains of Nazism on the pages of history. Could it be possible that the Nazi movement has been replaced by another system in these modern times? Stay tuned next on The Crossover.
We'll be right back.
For nearly 2,000 years, Jews and Christians have been divided. But now, God is calling for the healing of past hurts and the comforting of His people. Discover how God is prophetically uniting Jews and Christians across the world today on The Crossover. Here is Mitch Jerome.
John McTernan founded Branch of David Ministries. He's also the co-founder of International Cops for Christ. John's an apologist and appears on numerous TV and radio programs defending his Christian faith. He's the author of many books such as Israel, the Blessing or the Curse, and As America Has Done to Israel. John McTernan, welcome back to The Crossover.
Yes, thank you for having me again.
John, last time we had the ability to be together and you were teaching us on, in America, early in America, there was the beginning stages of the reception of the Jewish people from Russia here, and the hearts were open to receive them and help them and establish them in the land and give them opportunity. And that was back in the 1800s we're going, right? Let's move forward now to 1920, 1930, where here we are back again in America, but the whole attitude has tremendously changed towards the Jewish person. And what happened? What was going on?
Well, probably the 1920s and definitely the 30s was the darkest time in American history for the Jewish people. And I attribute that to the change in atmosphere to one man, Henry Ford. He believed, Henry Ford, and I'll admit this, he sincerely believed it. You can be sincere and wrong, but he sincerely believed it, that the Jew was the cause of all the world's problems, that World War I was caused by the Jews, that communism was caused by the Jews, the Great Depression was caused by the Jews.
They were the scapegoat.
Everything.
Eyes.
And
now, what brought him to that?
Now, this is really strange. He went on a cruise it was like a think tank cruise, and I believe it was to Scandinavia, during World War I, to try and come up with a way to create an armistice. Okay. This is before the end of the war.
Gotcha.
Because, the war was horrific. I mean, millions were dying, millions of soldiers were dying. And he came back from that cruise. I mean, from what I can determine, there was no vein of hatred in him before the cruise, for the Jews. He came back from the cruise, and World War I, all the Jews caused World War I, World War I. And from that day on, till he died, he didn't want nothing to do with Jewish people. He was convinced that they were the cause of the world's problem. And he would kind of smooth it over by saying, well, not like the average Jew in the United States, but the international Jew. That
was supposedly a comforting way of doing it.
Yeah, that's how he would kind of try and smooth over what he was saying.
Now, does this attitude carry over with his kids today that run the business? I'm
glad you mentioned that. No, his son. Well, of course, his son died early, but his grandson reversed that. He went to the Jewish population and he apologized and said he had nothing to do with his father and what his father had done.
Great.
So yeah, the Ford Motor Company no longer is like that. That was done in the 40s by his son and grandson.
So take us back to Henry Ford and some of he took this attitude and put his power, his influence, his money to action. And
yes,
what
he
are some
did.
of the things that he did?
Yes, he did. You have to realize now, back in the 1920s and 30s, Henry Ford is one of the greatest Americans. I mean, he's really looked up to. And so when he went on this crusade, it affected a lot of people. And what he did was he bought a newspaper in Dearborn, Michigan, to be his voice of anti-Semitism. And when the paper first started, he ran 52 weeks of the International Jew, the World's Worst Problem, non-stop, 52 weeks. And he used his Ford distributorship as a way of promoting the newspaper. And also, if you bought a Ford vehicle, you got a subscription. So it went up to be like the largest newspaper in the United States back then. It had 700,000 subscribers to it. And he used this now to poison the atmosphere, day in and day out, the Jew, the Jew, the Jew. And it got so severe that at one point, the former president of the United States, the current president of the United States, and it turns out the future president of the United States denounced him for what he was doing.
Taft, Harding, and Wilson. Huh?
Taft, Harding, and Wilson. And also a Booth from the Salvation Army. I just can't think of her first name right now. She came out and defended the Jews in light of what Ford was doing. It was powerful what he was doing, Mitch.
Well, here's the title, John. You alluded to it, but here it was in your book. The articles he read, the headline was called "The International Jew, the World's Foremost Problem." Like you said, he internationalized it. But take us, that was 700,000 approximate subscribers here in the land of America, but he did more than that. He took us overseas.
Well, what happened was those articles he put into a book, and there was two things here, Mitch. Let me explain. Okay. There's the newspaper, which he ran that headline, "International Jew, the World's Foremost Problem," and then
those are ongoing articles.
Ongoing articles.
One time only.
Right. Then he put together a book called with the same title, and then the book was extremely popular. Millions of copies sold. It was translated into 16 languages. And unfortunately, it was extremely popular in Germany, and it greatly inspired Adolf Hitler. And Hitler loved, I guess if that's the word, Henry Ford. He had a picture of Henry Ford hanging in his office. And if you visited Adolf Hitler, he had a copy of the International Jew. He used to keep copies in his office. So after meeting, like if Hitler was meeting with someone, he would then give it to him as a gift.
Yeah.
That's the influence that Henry Ford had, not only in America, but worldwide.
And, you know, even in your book here, John, you had a picture of Henry Ford getting honored. Want to share that?
Well, because today, I think the concept of Henry Ford and being such a Jew hater is lost. I mean, many people look at me when I tell them that. It's all, they have no concept of it.
Never heard of it.
So what I did was to kind of validify everything that I was putting in the book. I have a picture of Henry Ford receiving the highest award possible from the Nazi government given to a civilian. And you'll see the German ambassador there pinning the award on Henry Ford's chest. So
John, let's hop back from here. He is getting the award back to America, and on the American soil was this group called German American National Alliance, also called Bund. Teach us about who they were, what they represented, their declarations, etc.
Well, the Bund was the real Nazis in America. There were some Nazi sympathizers. And again, in the 1920s and 30s, we have these smaller groups. Some of them were called Silver Shirts, and these were Jew haters. I mean, they were hardcore Jew haters, which is foreign to America. Mm-hmm. You know, this prior to Henry Ford and all World War I, this is completely foreign. Right. Yeah, this is what I call European anti-Semitism, jumping the Atlantic and trying to get root here in America. And the main thrust of it was the Nazi Party in America, which was nicknamed, or the code, not code name, but the name for it was the Bund. And they had 68 chapters across the country. Unfortunately, they had several here in Texas. They had 28 camps. And one of the main ways for them to promote their agenda was through these camps. They would take youth there. In fact, in my book, in the center fold there, you'll look and you'll see the youth marching into Camp Siegfried. Do you see it there?
And John, they are in full uniform, Nazi uniform,
yes, right here.
Saluting.
No, this is the Bund. Mm-hmm. This is the Nazi youth marching in. There's thousands of them. You see it?
Yeah.
This isn't like a couple hidden in the woods someplace. This is Camp Siegfried.
How many acres was this place?
Camp Siegfried was 50, 60 acres.
Wow.
It was I call it ground zero for the Nazi movement. Mitch,
This was headquarters in America?
Excuse me?
This was their headquarters in America.
Well, yeah, New York and Camp Siegfried was the main nerve center for the Bund. At one point, Mitch, in August of 1938, there were 40,000 Nazis at Camp Siegfried.
Wow.
40,000.
And Long Island, John, is filled with Jewish people, big time.
Right.
And right there in their camp is this Nazi venom rising.
Right. And Mitch, that meeting in August of 1938 was the largest Nazi meeting outside of Germany on our soil. In fact, I have an advertisement in my book, the advertisement for that meeting.
Yes.
And on the opposite side of it, Mitch, you look up on top there, that is this is kind of unique, but in the book I have the train schedule, in the advertisement is the train schedules for the trains coming out to Camp Siegfried. Mm-hmm. The Nazis would rent entire trains from New York City. And here you have the train pulling in to Camp Siegfried.
Saluted.
It looks like Germany. You would not believe that this is America.
This is if you didn't see the picture.
Yeah.
You wouldn't believe this.
And right below it is the Nazi headquarters. That picture you're looking at now is the headquarters of the Nazis in America. The Nazis were so entrenched at Camp Siegfried that they built a little village alongside this camp for the Nazis.
German Gardens?
It's called German Gardens.
Okay.
And they named the streets. Now, some of them are like Berliner Street now, which really isn't offensive. But they actually named the street Adolf Hitler Street, Goring Street, and Goebbels Street. And to this day, that is the official name of that street. We have a name in the United States of a street today. Now, unofficially, it's called Park Boulevard. So if you go to that location, and by the way, there's a picture of me in the book at the corner of Goring and Hitler Street. Of course, it's called Park Boulevard and Oak Street today. But if you own property and you have a deed, on the deed it'll be Adolf Hitler Street. And I went to the tax map. I have the tax map. And the tax map will say Park Boulevard, parentheses, Adolf Hitler Street, because Adolf Hitler Street is the official name.
So, John,
that's how, Mitch, I don't want to blow this out of proportion, because the Nazis were not becoming mainstream in America. I don't want anybody to think from this interview that America almost became Nazi. What I want the people to understand is they were in America.
They had a foothold.
They had a foothold in America. They had people listening to them. They were widespread. When you have meetings of 40,000 in 1938 like that, that's significant. And it's unique. It's unique in American history. This is European anti-Semitism trying to take hold of America and turn America against the Jews, just like in Europe. Unfortunately, it never rose to the level of anti-Semitism of what we have in Europe.
We will be right back. Welcome back to The Crossover.
Makes you wonder if somebody could buy a newspaper and slant it their way like Ford did. Makes you wonder how much can we believe of any of the press that we have today, because they're owned by such huge corporations, and what's their doctrine? And also, where was the church? So here we had the church that was so pro-Israel, pro the land, helping these Russian Jews come over from being annihilated. Well, they were a voice back then with Blackstone. What a hero that Christian evangelist was. Well, we're not too far down the road from that time. Where are they now?
Well, that's a real good question, Mitch. I don't know what happened. The church, for some reason, was, I don't know if it lost its influence. I don't know what happened, but I can tell you this, Mitch. In my readings and studying and all, I didn't see any organized resistance against the Bund by the church. And there was some Jewish resistance, but not large scale. The Bund was doing its thing. There was some Jewish resistance. But as far as the church, they weren't out there supporting the Bund. but they sure weren't
And
resistant.
you were going to read the application to us, I think, before, John. We never got to it, but maybe that'd be interesting just to hear. To be part of the Bund was basically saying what? What were the qualifications?
Yeah, let me read their application, because the application tells it all. And I'm reading from the actual application to join the Nazi Party in America. The application reads, I hereby apply for admission to the membership of the German-American Bund. The purpose and aim of the Bund are known to me, which of course is Jew-hating. And I obligate myself to support them to the best of my ability. I recognize the leadership principle in accordance to which the Bund is being directed. I am Aryan descent, free of Jewish or colored blood.
Right. Free of Jewish or colored blood, huh? And
That was in America in the 1930s, that's how you joined. You signed this, that's how you joined the Nazi Party.
Well, tell us, John, what also, now here's interesting. What is also happening in the ocean at this period of time where, you tell us about this unique hurricane and why you even bring it in the book.
The Bible says that God blesses nations that bless the Jewish people, and that God curses nations that will curse the Jews, well, specifically with Abraham and his descendants in Genesis 12:3. And in my book, As America Was Done to Israel, one section of it, I draw these correlations, whereas the United States is interfering in the integrity of the nation of Israel and its borders, and all, awesome disasters are hitting the United States. I go back to 1938, the advertisement to attend the largest Nazi meeting outside of Germany at Camp Siegfried.
Okay.
That took place on August 16th, 1938.
Okay.
About a month later, one of the worst hurricanes ever to hit the United States, the equivalent of Hurricane Katrina.
It wasn't just any hurricane. There's always hurricanes coming
Right.
into this part of town. Well, not to Long Island. That's unique in itself, right? How often do they get hit with hurricanes?
Well, Long Island will get hit with hurricanes, but what's unique about this hurricane was a
not like the
Category
Caribbean.
3. It was a Category 3. There's only 3 Category 3 hurricanes ever to hit the United States, going back into the 1600s. The hurricane was properly identified and its course properly charted by a meteorologist, and no one would believe him, Mitch. But it was parallel with Cape Hatteras in North Carolina, and the Weather Bureau was telling the public that it was turning out to sea, when in fact it was heading directly for Long Island. The people in Long Island were told expect high winds, or all of New England expect high winds, but the hurricane and high seas, but the hurricane's turning out to sea. When the hurricane hit Cape Hatteras, it began to accelerate in speed. So you have the wind within the hurricane, but then you have the movement of the hurricane. It began to move at 70 miles an hour, which is unheard of. To this day, it's a record. The closer it got to Long Island, the faster.
Because an average hurricane for our viewers is at 15 to 20 miles an hour.
At 20
isn't
at the
it, right?
most, yeah, 15
Okay.
around there. So the people in Long Island and New England had no idea that it was coming. All of a sudden, just after 3 p.m. on September 21st, 1938, the people that survived this on the coast, they looked out over the ocean. Of course, the winds are fierce now. The waves are fierce. They see a fog, what appears to be a fog. It's a wall of water, 30 feet high, traveling at 70 miles an hour. It was the storm surge. It hit Long Island with such force, Mitch, that it registered on Richter scales as far as Alaska.
Wow.
And the very epicenter of it was Bellport, New York. Guess what town is directly above Bellport?
Could be Camp Siegfried.
Yaphank and Camp Siegfried. The eye of the great hurricane of 1938 literally went directly over Camp Siegfried and Adolf Hitler Street. It was one of the most destructive hurricanes ever. Devastated Long Island, wiped out the fishing fleet and marinas in New England and Long Island, killed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Providence, Rhode Island was under 20 feet of water. Wow. New Haven, Connecticut was on fire. Millions of trees. Fishing industry was destroyed. Millions of they estimate up to 1 billion trees came down. The great forests in New England were all destroyed. Roads came down. Cities were flooded.
It was also the one day of the year that was the equinox.
Yes, it was the highest of the high tides.
So in that day,
That hurricane hit under on the most extreme, worst circumstances that are possible. And what I'm making in the analogy I'm making in the book, the connection I'm making in the book, is that this storm went over Adolf Hitler Street a mere month after the largest Nazi meeting outside of Germany over the exact location. Isn't that amazing?
yeah, it's truly amazing. Now,
And there's only, in history, there's only been 3 storms like that.
exactly.
One in 1635, 1665, one in 1812, and the one in 1938.
So I know from your former writings and where you come from, this events like this have become even more commonplace right now in America if we take our hand and work against the will of Israel.
One other thing we nearly forgot that ties this in. At the same time the hurricane hit is when President Roosevelt was pressuring the Munich Peace Conference for the division of Czechoslovakia. So the headlines on the newspapers are the Great Hurricane of 1938 on one side, and on the other side is the division of Czechoslovakia, which of course was literally the catapult for Hitler into World War II. So at the exact and I'm sad to say that the United States was the catalyst to put Hitler and Chamberlain and the French together to carve up Czechoslovakia. And the nation that was being carved up was not present. So you can actually see on the headlines in the newspapers, and I have these headlines, New York Times, the division of Czechoslovakia, Hitler on the move, and the Great Hurricane hitting the United States.
So is there talk on if there are similarities between Nazism, Islam? Is that a harsh thing to say? Is that totally inaccurate, or what? They're both anti-Semitic. So
well, it's very interesting. You brought up some very, relevant questions here. When I read the Nazi propaganda and I read the Muslim propaganda about Israel and the Jews, it's like they went to the Nazi playbook and took it out. It's literally almost word for word. And Islam is trying to make a distinction between like Jews and Israel. And Henry Ford tried to do the same thing. He tried to say, well, I'm not talking about the individual Jew, I'm talking about the international Jew. But of course, if you attack Jews in one area, it will spill over into all the areas. And in my way of thinking, Islam is 10 times, 100 times worse than the Nazis.
because
The Nazis were limited to race. Islam is not. Islam can be any country at any time. Islam is far bigger, billion Muslims, has enormous resources with the oil.
what about the children and going to school and madrasas and indoctrination? Any similarity to Hitler? The youth being indoctrinated?
Yeah, you've got it, right. And they even have camps here. The Muslims even have camps here that could be very serious for us for training purposes and subversion. The Islam, it's like taking that spirit that was in the Nazis in the 1930s and just jumping to today and dumping it in our society today.
Exactly.
We're seeing the same thing all over
spirit.
again. Our campuses, our college campuses, there's vicious anti-Semitism on the college campuses today being spawned by the Muslims. They have speakers that could make circuit routes, and they're trying to link Israel with all war crimes and apartheid and all this actual venom for Israel. And of course that spills over to the Jewish people.
Yeah, where else can they do that but only in the free land that we have here to do
Well,
that?
Mitch, you said something that's dear to my heart. I was not alive in the 1920s and 30s, but I am in the time we are now. And there was no vocal opposition in the 1930s is really when it came to a head. And I plan, and as you can see in my books and my writings and my speaking, I plan to be very vocal.
Yes, you
Very
are.
vocal.
You remind me, John, of the meteorologist here. What was his name?
Charles Pierce.
So here's this one person, maybe this is symbolic, but saw the storm on the horizon. Yes, it was a hurricane, but the same storm was Nazism.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And he was speaking, but nobody was listening to him, right? He was,
That must have been some feeling.
and here you are you're out here reaching a remnant, not the majority, I know that, but you can probably wonder, is anyone hearing at times?
I'm encouraged, Mitch, of people like yourself. When I first was out there as that, you want to call it lone voice, it was very discouraging. But now there are infinitely more people aware of what's going on than there were 20 years ago. So in that sense, I'm encouraged.
America's going through some tough times right now. 401ks are being wiped away. Dollar is vanishing. The value is worth less and less. Our jobs are they're already gone overseas. Middle class is being erased. Homes are being foreclosed, taken back. Worse than the Depression, I heard some newsmen say, whether that's accurate or not. But what should we be looking at? We could be looking at all that kind of news, and not that it's not real, but definitely depressing. Or how do we focus? How does a Christian believer, how does a non-believer, what do we do in these days?
Well, in my book, it goes beyond what we've discussed. I go into Bible prophecy and the restoration of the nation of Israel, and what's God's plan after that. I mean, it's not just nearly the restoration of the nation of Israel. It doesn't end there. That's just the beginning. And the beginning is God has a prophetic plan, and nations that line up with that plan, He blesses. And I don't, in my way of thinking, when I see the scriptures, we were greatly blessed because America blessed the Jewish people. And now, it doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican, we've been interfering with God's prophetic plan. We've been trying to pressure Israel to divide the land, divide Jerusalem, make Jerusalem the capital of a Palestinian state, even though these people have they've made it crystal clear they want to destroy Israel and destroy the Jewish people. We are still pressuring Israel. And as a result, we've brought the curses the Bible speaks about. So what we need to do is to actually good old-fashioned repentance. I mean, how else can you say it? And to stand with the Jewish people, with the nation of Israel, and to somehow get the policy of the American government to stop this insane dividing of the nation of Israel in face of.
It's going to take the voice like Blackstone to speak up. Hopefully people will learn and gather and glean it.
God bless you, too.
Join Mitch and Rosalie as they reach an ever-growing worldwide audience through The Crossover. We invite you to become a Crossover partner right now by calling the number on your screen. For your monthly gift of $30 or more, you will receive the Crossover Partnership Pack, which includes a DVD of today's program, a personal greeting and prayer message from Mitch and Rosalie, more information about the Crossover Project. As you continue to support the Crossover each month, you will receive a new Crossover DVD, plus a ministry report, and your name will be added to our healing room. Call now and join the growing family of Crossover Partners. And be sure to join us again next week as Mitch and Rosalie tackle timely topics and welcome dynamic guests on The Crossover.
Let it be known today that you are God.